Fellas, we are live. How are we doing? Happy Sunday. Let me just double check. So, we had a fun main slate, first of all, right? And if you played NBA today, that was kind of a sweat to get lineups in before lock 3 minutes ago with all the news that we had. But we're on to Sunday night. We have a pretty decent showdown game. We got Seattle visiting Washington. Jaden Daniels is playing, but he is possibly not 100%. And I think that's like the biggest thing on the Washington side. We already knew that Terry McLaurin was going to be out. D Kippy in the chat, bear down Bears. Love it. Chris, hey, love to have you in the chat today. We'd love to hear, I'm sure the people would love to hear your perspective on some of the things that we're going to talk about here too. So let's get through the injury report real quick. I already mentioned that Jaden McDaniels is playing. He might not be 100%. Terry McLaurin's out. The tight end for Washington, backup tight end, Colston Yankoff is out. Laramie Tunsil, the left tackle, was questionable, but it sounds like he's expected to play, so we're not worried about that. And then they did make a slight other change at wide receiver. Robbie Chosen is back on the practice squad, so he's not playing tonight, but Treylon Burks is on the active roster. He was just elevated. As for Treylon Burks, just real quick, I don't even think we had him listed in the model. Is he even in the player pool? Oh, he is in the player pool. So he's the min price, but we're not really projecting him for any snaps or routes run. So it would just be a very, very high risk shot. It's not like we have any confidence that he's good on an NFL level. So that would be a deep shot. And honestly, we have tons of value today, probably the most viable value that we've had on a showdown slate yet this season. As for the Seattle side, they're missing some wide receivers. Cooper Kupp is out, Jake Bobo's out, and Derek Young is out. Their tight end 3, Eric Saubert, is out. Now, he only runs about 5 routes a game, but he plays a lot of blocking snaps. Maybe some of those extra snaps go to Elijah Arroyo, especially since they're already so short at the wide receiver position. But we'll talk about that in a bit. And then on defense, Seattle's missing Julian Love, safety. And their defensive tackle, Jaron Reed, is questionable. He is their starter, but they didn't elevate anyone, so we're going to assume that he's playing. So we're not really docking anyone, like any team, offense or defense, just based on their personnel tonight. Let's see. What's up, Eli? Happy to have you here, man. What's up? How do you think of Horton as a value captain if Cup can't go? So we'll talk about Horton. I do think he's a viable captain, but the thing is that we don't have that many guys to pay up for. And if we're playing Horton at MVP or at captain, let me just show you how that looks. We'll have Horton at captain. We're going to play JSN. He is the top play on the model. Like he might be 2 tiers above everyone else on DraftKings. That's how good JSN looks tonight. And you guys are going to love our second and third top plays tonight as well. They're not, well, one of them's a tight end, Zach Ertz, but we'll throw JSN. We'll throw Jaden Daniels. We'll throw Sam Darnold. It still leaves us 5,500 per player. Now we're probably not going to be able to get to Debo here, but we do have options with getting to basically any running back. Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt is our second ranked play on DraftKings today, so we'll throw him in there. It leaves 3,600. We can get to our boy, A.J. Barner, probably the top value play on the slate tonight. So if you are playing Horton at captain, in smaller fields, it's probably fine. Lets you fit in, basically all the guys that we want to get in here. But for larger fields, just be aware of the duplication chance. This is going to be like this lineup specifically. I mean, to me, is the most obvious Horton lineup. So, you got to switch something up here. Maybe we're fading one of these guys. Maybe we'll take Crosby-Merritt out. Even with one of the Seattle running backs, is still likely to be pretty duplicated. So just be aware of that. Maybe you have Horton in there. We don't want to play Barner with him. We can go to the slightly lower owned Elijah Arroyo. There's not that many punts. Like most weeks, I'm not really into the min price punts, especially we have so many in this 3K to 5K range. So there are options, but just realize that it's probably going to be duped unless you're leaving a healthy amount of salary on the table. And then what Seattle running back do we like? So Zach Charbonnet is showing up slightly higher on the model on DraftKings. He's only a little bit cheaper though, 7K versus Ken Walker 7,600. It's a different story over on FanDuel, where Kenneth Walker is 11,200 versus Charbonnet's only 8,600. But the model actually has Ken Walker higher over on FanDuel than Zach Charbonnet, even at that higher price. So that's something to keep in mind. It's hard to to really know who's going to get the touchdown tonight, right? Between Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. But we can look at it like, so first of all, the model's already higher on Charbonnet on DraftKings at the cheaper price. So we're going to slightly lean towards Charbonnet on DraftKings. Charbonnet has 22 red zone touches to Walker's 17, but within 5 yards on the goal line, Charbonnet has 9 carries to Walker's 3. So that just tells me that Charbonnet likely has more goal line equity, more touchdown equity. They're both strong plays, but I think Charbonnet is going to be our preference, especially with that price difference over on FanDuel. And then I do just want to mention George Holani. He's a running back 3. The only game that he's played a snap in this season was when I believe Charbonnet missed in week 3. But he does run routes, and they're missing guys who are going to, or who can catch the football tonight. Not to mention that he's probably going to be their kick returner with Derek Young out. So George Holani, I just want to mention him. I already said I hate these like min-price punts, but he might play a snap or a couple snaps tonight. Just be aware of that. Sounds like I'm fading JD. It's funny. So it's tough, like to say, yeah, we're interested in fading Jaden Daniels tonight. He's a 4th-ranked play over on DraftKings. His price is pretty high. It's not hard to fit him in. We have a lot of value. Over on FanDuel, Jaden Daniels is the 2nd-ranked play. He's projected for 37% MVP ownership, which is the highest on the slate. On DraftKings, he's projected for 24% captain ownership, and then obviously he's projected for healthy flex ownership. I don't mind getting away from him at captain and MVP since he's one of the higher owned guys. We have plenty of options. But the other side of it is we also have plenty of value options to make playing JSN and Jaden Daniels at the captain spot very easy. I will mention with the model being so much higher on Jackson Smith and Jigba than everybody else, he is going to take up the bulk of my captain ownership. I think my run earlier, I had about 50% on DraftKings, so I'm not even that far over the field. I mean, almost 1.5x, but he's projected for so much ownership. You could consider getting away, but we have him as such a strong play that I'm not doing that tonight. But as for Jaden Daniels, I did get less of him than I would have expected anyway. I'm under ownership on him. Point spread, we got a 3-point game. What's interesting here is the total has climbed up though. I believe 3.5 points since opening. So that's pretty interesting. We're at a 49-point total. Strong total. We can always consider playing for the under, but we have so many good value plays that aren't kickers or defenses that we don't have to. And then if we do want to play for the under, I think the kickers and defenses are under-owned across the board. So we could mix those guys in pretty easily. And as for like a lot of the value plays that we're going to talk about in a second, Chris Moore, AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo, not Ja'Cory Brooks. Who's the other guy? Jalen Lane, the other guy in Washington. And I'll mention the highest ranked of these cheapy Washington secondary receivers is actually Luke McCaffrey today. The model loves him. I'll mention he saw an uptick in snaps the last couple of weeks. Even with Terry McLaurin back last week, he still saw that uptick. They did lose. Yeah, they were down the whole game, so maybe that's just a result of them trying to play catch up. The same thing with the previous week in Dallas when he saw increased snaps. But the model likes his potential tonight, so we're getting Luke McCaffrey projected for 6% ownership on DraftKings, only 13% over on FanDuel. So I think this is a spot that we can look to get a little bit different if we're playing one of those chalky captains with a bunch of the chalky value. McNichols again. Yeah, so McNichols is going to be the passing down back. I'm going to tie this into Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt as well. So he's been pretty bad the last few games, but they want him to be the man. Like, no one else is touching the football on the ground for this team except for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I mean, other guys are getting a snap here or there, or a carry here or there, I should say, but it really seems like they want Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt to be the man. We had high expectations before the season. I don't know if he's met them yet, but the model has him ranked as the 2nd best play over on DraftKings at the price. And then over on FanDuel, Krosky-Merritt is ranked 4th. His ownership, we're not really getting him at an ownership discount. Maybe on DraftKings, he's only projected for 32% in the flex with 3% captain. I think that's a spot we can attack. Over on FanDuel, the price is a little bit different at $9,400, but he's projected for basically the same ownership, 2% MVP and 33% in the flex. We still have those awesome value plays, so I like getting to Krosky-Merritt. But to your question about McNichols, so let me just pull up his snap share from the last. I've already mentioned they kind of were playing catch up in these two games. So he played a little bit more than he had in the previous weeks this season. He thought he saw 36% of snaps in week 7 and 43% in week 8, compared to being usually right around 30%. Krosky Merritt didn't really lose snaps because of this, though. And so they did have McNichols out there running more routes. Where's the targets? Yeah, I mean, 6 targets. Like, this is his value right here in the passing game. He only has 1 or 2 carries per week. I'll mention that 2 of these carries mixed in were red zone carries, so there is a possibility there of some touchdown equity. But with McNichols, I'm really just looking at him for the receiving upside. The model has McNichols as a pretty decent play. It's actually for the price, it has McNichols as a better play than Deebo Samuel over on FanDuel and over on DraftKings. He's not quite better than Deebo on DraftKings, but he still stands out. I mean, we have him just ranked ahead of both defenses and both kickers. He's projected for 10% ownership in the flex, 12% over on FanDuel. So this is another guy that we can definitely consider mixing in. I'm probably going to lean towards the other guys when I'm building our dummy lineups today, but you can definitely mix in McNichols. He's model approved today. Have to fade a QB on FanDuel. Which one? So most of my action tonight is on FanDuel. Let me see what I had going on there. So I'll mention, it looks like I'm going to be fading Jaden Daniels a little bit at the MVP spot. He's projected for 37% ownership there. Going to get a healthy amount in the flex, though. It's not hard to fit him in the flex. Again, we have all the value. And then Sam Darnold. Yeah, JSN is my highest owned MVP and captain. And so I'm getting a decent amount of Darnold at MVP actually as well and captain. But I'm playing a lot of Darnold in the flex. He's projected for 44% flex ownership on DraftKings and 54 on FanDuel. I'm over on both of those numbers. So the field is going to lean into Seattle today. Seattle 4-2 is going to be the most popular stack, projected to be the most popular build anyway. Seattle 5-1 is going to pull some ownership, and then 3-3s are pretty even with either team at the captain spot. Now, Washington 4-2s are going to be pretty good leverage. I'll mention that to accomplish that, you probably have to play at least one of these punts in Luke McCaffrey, Chris Moore, or Jalen Lane. Maybe you go as far as like Chris Rodriguez, but I don't even think I mentioned Chris Rodriguez in the plug today. His OF index on DraftKings is the minimum rating, which means we don't really project him for much. But over on FanDuel, Chris Rodriguez actually has a decent rating. He's 2,600 over there, projected for 0% ownership. He hasn't really been getting snaps. He played 2 snaps last week, 9 the week before when they were down by a bunch. So maybe we could see something there, but I didn't feel the need to include him today. But again, yeah, as for fading a QB on FanDuel, I am getting away from Jaden Daniels a little bit, which is scary because he's like the highest projected player on the slate, which is really tough to get away from on FanDuel. But I'm getting my ownership there in the flex. I'm just hoping someone else is the winning captain MVP tonight. Another Chris Moore touchdown tonight with McLaurin out. I actually was a little bit surprised how low the model was on Chris Moore. Of the players that have like a real OF index rating, Chris Moore and Jalen Lane are the 2 lowest over on DraftKings, even at their 3,400 and 3,800 prices. And I got to think that the rest of the industry has them projected pretty low as well, because Chris Moore is only projected for 16% ownership in the flex on DraftKings. He's over at 30% on FanDuel, but the price is 2,200, which is like, this is a pretty great value shot over on FanDuel and Chris Moore. Yeah, I mean, if he just gets 5 targets tonight, I don't care if he catches them or not. At 2,200, that's worth it for me. And then Jalen Lane, he's a little bit more expensive, but similar boat. Like, he's so cheap that we can just slide him in. Jalen Lane only projected for 13% ownership on FanDuel, so that could be a possible spot. If you somehow have 1,600 left over and your lineup's kind of chalky, you could consider the pivot down to Jalen Lane at half the ownership. And he's basically half the ownership over on DraftKings as well. As for Chris Moore and Jalen Lane in the captain spot, maybe if I got them in my 150 set on FanDuel at MVP, it's just a percent or two. But I actually got a couple percent, 3%-ish on DraftKings of Chris Moore and Jalen Lane at the captain spot, which is very similar to playing Torrey Horton at captain. It just, you're getting the 1% captain, really hoping that, I mean, they probably have to catch a touchdown to be the winning captain unless the rest of the fantasy scoring is so condensed that it doesn't matter what he does. But Just looking at this, if we plug Chris Moore in at captain, we still have our top three studs here. Let's plug in Charbonnet in this one, and that still leaves us 3,600. We can get to Torrey Horton, AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo, who are all standout value plays today. So very similar if you're going with that cheap captain. Just beware of the duplication chances. All right, let's take a look here. We'll do a Darnold captain build with JSN Ertz. Yeah, Ertz, one of the top plays in the model today. His price is definitely a little bit too low. And it just Terry McLaurin out. We really like Zach Ertz tonight at this price on DraftKings. Debo, Horton. And we'll round it out with Barner. Yeah, I mean, this is another lineup that's just like very, very obvious, especially for hand builders. You know, we're fading Jaden Daniels here. But yeah, I think this is a pretty good lineup if you're going with that Seattle 4-2. That's one way to get a little bit different, is to fade Jaden Daniels if you're going with the chalky build like this. Chris Moore looks good. Yeah, it's so Chris Moore again. Yeah, a couple guys have mentioned him. I figured he would be one of the popular guys to talk about tonight. Again, he's pretty low on the model, but he is only projected for 16% ownership on DraftKings at that 3,400 price versus Torrey Horton's 36% ownership at the 3,200 price. I don't know that we necessarily want to make that pivot, but it's an idea. Is it dumb to not get any running backs? So in my high risk set, I'm pretty interested in Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I would have preferred if he was projected for lower-ish ownership. Maybe the hand builders are going to be less likely to click on him since he's had such poor performances these last few games. But remember, if you watch this show, I don't really care about guys performing poorly. I care about the opportunity that they had. And his snap share isn't quite that of a workhorse, but his price is also appropriate for what we're expecting from him tonight. So Krosky-Merritt, very high on the model. That's going to be my top choice at running back tonight. At least we know he's the clear lead back over in Washington. And then with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, it's tough, yeah, because they're both going to split snaps. Neither one of them is going to take over the workload unless one of them gets hurt. Like I said earlier, Charbonnet's gotten more snaps this season, and he has much more opportunity on the goal line within 5 yards. So Charbonnet is going to be my preference. But if you want to fade the running backs, that seems fine. Is playing Charbs and Walker together dumb? I think it's fine. I'm personally not setting a rule to disclude them from the same lineup. It's an idea. If you're playing for the under, you could play both running backs from the same team with the same team defense, and then maybe throw in a kicker, one quarterback, something like that. That's the lineups that I'm most likely to play Sharps and Ken Walker together. If maybe I'm playing for the under and I have Seattle's defense in there too, probably fading Sam Darnold in that lineup, probably fading JSN in that lineup too. So that's an idea, yeah. McNichols, yeah, he's going to be the passing down back. And so, like I said earlier, his value is basically just in the passing game. We're not really expecting to do much on the ground. This was kind of an outlier. But he did get 2 red zone touches earlier in the season. He hasn't in a few weeks. Washington doesn't get that many red zone opportunities to begin with, so that's not a huge deal. And like I said earlier, he's model approved. He's probably going to be forgotten among all the other value guys that we have tonight, especially those Seattle guys. So it's like an extra piece of leverage to get off those guys and to get on a player on the opposite team. The best FanDuel values? Let's take a look. AJ Barner is still going to stand out as probably the top value over on FanDuel, even at that higher price. His rating is a little bit lower on the model. Like the difference between DraftKings and FanDuel is pretty significant for AJ Barner, but we're also getting him at a pretty significant ownership discount over here. We only have him projected for 13% ownership, 0 at MVP. So still like AJ Barner over here. Going straight by the model though, like Krosky-Merritt is ranked 4th. He's not exactly a value, but 9,400, he is lower than all these other studs up here. Jason Myers and Matt Gay, both kickers, look pretty good. I think actually, okay, we didn't need I wasn't sure if one of these guys was questionable, but these guys are always going to show up as strong values over on FanDuel. Both defenses are fine to mix in. And then Zach Ertz at 7,200 stands out as probably underpriced. Jeremy McNichols is 4,400 over on FanDuel. He is an option. But Torrey Horton is 3K over here. It's like if you're looking at the model right now, he's not that high on the FanDuel model. and he's projected for very healthy ownership. But Torrey Horton's got to be one of the top plays on the slate tonight. Regardless of anything else, he's priced to be the third receiver and play about 50% of snaps, which is what he's been playing. But with Cooper Kupp out tonight, with all those other guys out tonight, the very obvious adjustment is to play Torrey Horton more snaps, right? And so I'm looking at him as just underpriced no matter how you view him as a player. So Torrey Horton is probably going to be the top value, actually. And then we can also consider Luke McCaffrey, Chris Moore, Jalen Lane, Elijah Arroyo over on FanDuel as well. Kupp is out. Yeah, Kupp is not playing tonight. If John Bates doesn't play, Sanat becomes a good punt in the Stars and Scrubs lineup. Let me see. So their tight end breakdown, John Bates. Did I miss that on the injury report? Just double check that. I missed it on the injury report. So he's still questionable. He was limited yesterday or on Friday in practice, I guess. So let's say that John Bates misses the game. Ben Sanat has been on the field every week. Let me see if I can look up how many routes he's been running real quick. Sorry, I usually have all this stuff ready to go. Wasn't expecting that one, though. So Ben Sanat, oh man, this guy's running. He ran 2 routes last week, 7 the week before, 4, 4, 6, 7, 3. It's tough. This is definitely a guy that had higher expectations coming into the NFL. I'm not sure how many routes John Bates runs either. Let me check. John Bates, so he runs a few more, 7, 12, 10 over the last three weeks. It's possible that those extra routes just go to Zach Ertz. Ben Sanat could definitely pick those up. As for what the model thinks about Ben Sanat, he's like the lowest ranked player on here on both sides, projected for no ownership. He's only 600 on DraftKings, 1,400 on FanDuel. So I guess you could consider him if that salary savings is meaningful to you, but we already have so many strong plays in this range that I don't think it's necessary, especially if you're playing like small fields. I don't think I would consider Ben Sanat unless I'm playing maybe the largest contest on DraftKings, like this 200K play action or just the main event for tonight. Ricky White or Cody White? I was hoping someone would ask about this. So Ricky White and Cody White, these are players who play for Seattle. So I don't think Ricky White has played a single snap yet this season, while Cody White played 5 in week 1 when they were missing Jake Bobo and Derek Young. Now, Cody White did have a real model rating today. Yeah, they actually both have real model ratings today. They're both the flat min price. Ricky White. And Cody White. But it's hard to, again, for the same reasons that we're not that interested in players like a Ben Sanat, is just, while the salary could be useful, we have enough value that it's not necessary. I would be more interested in Cody White, though. He's projected for 5% ownership on DraftKings, 7 on FanDuel. Like I said, he's played 5 snaps this season. They're very short, so he's definitely going to be the likely next man up. But it seems very risky. If you're making a set of 150, I'm okay getting a couple percent and punting off on that, yeah. What do I think of Krosky, Merritt, or Ertz at captain? I think they're great, and they seem very overlooked to me today. Krosky Merritt's only projected for 3% captain ownership and 2% MVP ownership, while Ertz is projected for 3% captain and 0% MVP. And so a lot of the time, I am less inclined to play these type of guys at MVP on FanDuel. But on DraftKings, let's take a look with let's take a look with Ertz, and we'll get Corey Krosky Merritt in the flex. We'll get JSN in there still. We'll get Jaden Daniels, quarterback for our captain. Can't fit Sam Darnold here, but we basically have our option of anyone we want to play down here. Zach Ertz is already a lower owned captain, so we don't necessarily have to play Luke McCaffrey. We could consider him. Excuse me, in the largest contest, but we have both kickers. We have McNichols, both defenses, Lane, Moore, Horton, Barner, Arroyo. And I think those guys, just this is a really good night to mass multi-entry and just mix up the value plays with your favorite captains because there's a lot of combinations. It's pretty high variance who's going to catch a touchdown tonight. Hopefully a couple of these guys do, but yeah, the big point is just that we have a lot of options here. Let's run Krosky Merritt at captain since we had a little bit of salary left over. Zach Ertz, 5,900. Let's just get to Luke McCaffrey, which is a little bit awkward. Maybe we'll fade Ertz here and we'll get to Sam Darnold, pair with JSN, leaves us 1,500, which we'd like to try to avoid. So maybe there's something we can swap around in here. But I think they're fine captain options just based on their low ownership, and the model loves them. So like going by the model, they're probably actually two of the top captain options. These aren't players that you want like 20% captain exposure to though in your set. That's probably a little bit too high. They're only projected for 3% and 2% captain and MVP ownership, Krosky Merritt and Zach Ertz. So you can just, if you're making a 20 max set, getting one share of each at captain is already over the field, but you could play 2 or 3 shares of each of those guys at captain or one of those guys at captain, and that gives you pretty good leverage on those lineups. How often do I want to play JSN at captain on DK with no Darnold? So I do not have the rule set today that Darnold is a requirement when JSN is captain, but he just naturally ends up in most of those lineups anyway. And so I'd say most of the time you probably want to play Sam Darnold at captain, especially I don't know if the public perception on him is still down because I think Sam Darnold is at the very least an above average quarterback in this league, and there's not many of them. Looking at the ownerships, like they seem pretty friendly if we're interested in playing him. 44% flex on DraftKings, 54% flex on FanDuel. The captain and MVP ownership isn't too bad. And so I'm pretty interested in playing Sam Darnold with JSN captain. What do I think of a 5-1 Seahawks onslaught with Zach Ertz? I think that was the dummy that I unintentionally built earlier. Yeah, we put JSN at captain, Sam Darnold. Try it with Krosky Merritt. We'll get our top one of our top value plays in Torrey Horton here. Leaves us 5,400 to get to Zach Ertz. And yeah, basically our choice of whichever your other favorite value play is. I think it's great. Oh, this isn't 5-1, not Krosky Merritt, sorry. Who would be the other player here? Can't go Jaden Daniels because that only leaves 400. We could go Debo and get to Elijah Arroyo. Again, that's not 5-1 though, sorry. You're asking for a 5-1, Jose. We'll plug in Charbonnet. Leaves us 5,000 to get to the Seattle kicker. Seems like a really pretty strong build for smaller fields. Maybe large fields too. Probably a little bit duped, but it is fading Jaden Daniels, so there's some leverage there. Is Traylon Burks playing? Traylon Burks is active. Your guess is as good as mine as to how many routes he's going to run. I would guess very little, if not just 0. We didn't give him a model ranking. He's $200. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, if he was a player that we had confidence in, that he was good at an NFL level, then we'd be pretty interested in playing him since they have a need at wide receiver. But for what we're looking at today, we still have Chris Moore, Jalen Lane, and Luke McCaffrey as options on Washington, who are pretty cheap. And while this 200 is useful, I just don't think it's necessary today. Let's see what we got going on. Let's build a couple more on FanDuel, and I'll get out of here in a minute, guys. Let me just make sure I touched on everything. Let's take a look at maybe we want to play for the under a little bit. It's a high total game, and so this is a pretty high risk, but maybe Jaden Daniels is a little bit more hurt than they've led on. So let's still run JSN at MVP since we'll be able to have the salary. We're going to fade Jaden, play Sam Darnold. We're going to get Charbonnet in here again. Let's get Zach Ertz. I was going to try to fit Debo in, but I want to see what the salary looks like first. I'm pretty sure we still could, actually. Torrey Horton at 3K is complete misprice. Barely short to get to Debo Samuel. But we said we're playing for the under, so let's do Charbonnet, Corey Krosky Merritt. Get the Seattle defense, 3,100. Yeah, again, we're getting to Torrey Horton, Chris Moore. So a couple options there. Let's try Sam Darnold at MVP actually, and let's run both. We're going to fade JSN in this one, play both Seattle running backs, and I have a feeling Kenneth Walker is going to come in very low owned on FanDuel. We haven't projected for 23%, but most hand builders are just going to click on Charbonnet automatically with that price difference. And Charbonnet is probably the lead back here anyway. He plays more snaps. But yeah, this lets us get to AJ Barner. This is a fine underbuild. Gives us a QB with one pass catcher, three pass catchers, but both of his running backs, the running back on the other side, Seattle defense. Maybe we can try to get it in with Zach Ertz as the one-off, 8,200. I mean, this would be leaving some salary, so probably upgrade or change something around here. Maybe you could fit in JSN. But just some ideas to help fit in the defense and kickers, because I know for me on slates like this, it's a little bit tougher for me to just click on them when I'm hand building my lineups, and so I let the optimizers do it for me. Probably just want to get a little bit over the field on all four of them. Seattle defense is projected for pretty low ownership on both sites, as is Washington defense, and then kickers are pulling a little more ownership on FanDuel, but they're pretty low owned on DraftKings, and they're only like $1,000, $1,500 more than those other value plays, so they might get a little bit forgotten tonight. Everyone's going to try to click on, which one of these 3 to 4K guys is going to catch the touchdown or two. Who's my favorite captain? It's JSN, which is maybe a poor answer since he's the highest projected captain, but if you want leverage on it, you could just really jam him in there. On DraftKings, I don't know if they're great captain options, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt anyway, but him and Zach Ertz do stand out as solid captain options. It's just a matter of what you're doing with that salary savings, because if you're just going to jam Jaden Daniels, JSN, and Sam Darnold in the flex, it's probably going to be duped no matter which value guy you choose, which isn't a terrible thing. Don't avoid playing a good lineup just because you project it to be duped, but like this is just too easy to get to. It's probably a pretty strong lineup for like the smaller the field is, this is probably looking great. It's fading the running backs, but we don't mind that. JSN. All right. So this is Millie Bill. What's up, Brian? Appreciate you being here. We'll do JSN, no QB, one DST. So we'll go with Seattle defense here. Let's do Jay Myers, same team kicker as our captain. Let's get Deebo Samuel in there. Leave us 6,700. Zero QB, one DST. Probably need a running back in here too, so we'll do Charbonnet. Leaves us 6,400. We can get to Zach Ertz. We can take out Deebo. Can we fit Ken Walker? Yeah, we could fit Ken Walker and Charbonnet. We could fit Charbonnet and Krosky-Merritt. This is fading both quarterbacks. Seahawks, Jay Myers. Yeah, again, just a lot of options to mix it up here. Could still get Torrey Horton in here. Leaves us 12,800. Like you could possibly be leaving some salary if you're playing some of those value guys, which is probably a little bit more okay to leave salary tonight than it is usually. Swap out Horton for Barner or Elijah Arroyo, maybe. Maybe you could still fit in one QB in this build if you wanted to. Do you want to play so many pass catchers with JSN at captain? So it's okay to play the same team pass catchers when, the top stud is at the captain, especially when they're as cheap as Torrey Horton. Charbonnet's still going to have that touchdown equity. And so you're probably going to want Sam Darnold in here either way, but I think it's fine. I don't have any problem with playing. I mean, tonight they're so cheap. It's just, you could probably get away with playing two pass catchers with Sam Darnold in the flex and JSN at captain. Maybe we'll take Charbonnet out of there to get Jaden Daniels in there. It still leaves us 3,600 to get to anyone we want down here. So, yep, I think that it's going to about do it, fellas. Hopefully you got some good information here. I think the main thing is just we want to mix it up a little bit, right? Lots of value plays projected for ownership. There's a few projected for lower ownership that we can take advantage of. If JSN hits, then he might not throw the ball too much. It's a possibility. And the Seahawks are actually a pretty good team, but I mean, this is projected to be a 3-point spread, and so I'm not exactly projecting any type of blowout like that. Obviously, you know, no one would be surprised if Seattle went up 14-0 in the first quarter. JSN catches a touchdown, and then Charbonnet and Ken Walker get a lot of work, but it's not something I'm really worried about tonight. If I'm playing JSN captain, I'm just going to hope the game stays close. Commanders should be behind. That's what we're expecting, yeah. And so if you're building for that game script, then I think that's great. So let's say we have JSN at captain, and they're going to have to be throwing the whole game. This could be a bit of a way to get leverage if you fade actually most of the other Seattle pass catchers. We'll take a shot on Chris Moore. We'll go with won't be able to fit in Debo here. Can't fit Zach Ertz either. Interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting one when considering maybe we don't want to play any other Seattle players with JSN and Sam Darnold. It's actually kind of hard to fit in Jaden Daniels as well. Excuse me. Get one of these $200 punts that we're not that interested in tonight, like Ricky White or Cody White or Treylon Burks. Trying to see how we could make this build work. Because if Jaden Daniels is going to be throwing, we're going to be hoping he's going to be throwing a touchdown. There's like no one else to go down from Chris Moore, though. Luke McCaffrey. We don't know. I don't know that we want to like fade Zach Ertz, but we can try to make it work without him. It's actually kind of hard over on DraftKings. Yeah, that's a tough one coming from behind with a JSN captain. So work over on FanDuel. It's the last one, then I'm going to get out of here, fellas. We'll do JSN, Sam Darnold, Jaden Daniels. It's 5K per player already. Zach Ertz. Yeah, it's just Torrey Horton's salary is just so helpful when we're building any type of lineup here. Could even go a little lower to Chris Moore. Gets us up to 5,600 AJ Barner. So I guess my final word on playing JSN captain MVP with another Seattle pass catcher in the flex is don't intentionally avoid it. If you can find a strong lineup that accomplishes no other pass catchers, then it's fine. But don't put yourself into a worse lineup just because you want to avoid that, because there's a lot of ways that lineup ends up getting there. Which Commanders wide receiver would I play other than Debo? So on FanDuel, Chris Moore's price is just really dumb at 2,200. Again, regardless of what you think of the player, it's incorrect. Luke McCaffrey is a little bit higher priced at 5K, but given that he's projected for much less ownership than Lane and Moore, particularly over on DraftKings, I'm pretty interested in where'd he go? In Luke McCaffrey as like our low-owned, high-risk shot tonight. Decent chance he doesn't do anything, but if he, has a game where he just has the opportunity to catch a couple of balls, maybe a touchdown, then he's gonna be in the winner tonight. So I'd say Luke McCaffrey, the high-risk guy, but you don't want to play a ton of him because, again, he's projected for under 10% ownership, so don't go crazy. I made a mistake on the stream last week talking about playing a little bit too much of those high-risk tight ends. We have a few high-risk tight ends on the slate again tonight. Elijah Arroyo, AJ Barner, and Zach Ertz isn't as high risk as those guys, but they feel a lot stronger than the tight ends we've been talking about in the last couple of slates. So hopefully it works out tonight. Hopefully the model leads us to good. Just to recap, JSN, the top play by a mile. Zach Ertz, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and the QBs also look great. Top value plays, AJ Barner, Torrey Horton, and Elijah Arroyo. Can consider Chris Moore. So appreciate everybody tuning in. I hope it's a good night. It's good luck to us. We'll see you guys next week.